Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I am the host of this show. And every week I get to talk to interesting CEOs, founders, entrepreneurs of all kinds of companies ranging from YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, Netflix, OpenTable, Axe Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where you help connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And I want to give a quick shout out, a big thank you to Larry, the connector, Benet, good friend from Los Angeles. When Larry introduced me to today's guest, I immediately liked him because he is a recovering lawyer turned entrepreneur like me. I always like people like that. He was the co-founder of a company called Akamai. Is that how you say it? Akamai. God, why did that come off right? Akamai Technologies, which serves nearly 30% of the world's web traffic. It's a member of the S&P 500, 8,000 employees, $3.2 billion in revenues last year. He's also the founder and CEO of Jump Investors. It's a VC firm and his family office. Since the formation in 1999, they've invested in more than 60 early and late stage technology companies. I think maybe you've heard of a few of them: Google, Seagate, Lyft, Postini, acquired by Google for $625 million last year. He's also an active investor in real estate, private equity, and he's also the founder and CEO of Sandee, which is a travel company focused on the promotion of beaches, beach tourism around the world. He's also a photographer and has a really cool coffee table book called Bliss, which you have to go check out. It's got some beautiful photography in there. And he's got a new podcast coming out very soon called In Search of Excellence as well. And he has 5 kids. I don't know how he does all these things, but we're going to find out. But this episode is brought to you by Rise25, where we help B2B businesses to get clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships with done-for-you podcasts and content marketing. If you're listening to this and you've ever been curious about how to start a podcast like Randy just did, then shoot us an email at support@Rise25Media, or go to our website, rise25.com, or check out some of my past podcast episodes where we talk a lot about how to leverage content marketing. All right, Randy, so I'm so excited to have you here. You've got such an impressive background, so many different things you've been involved in, and I want to ask you about so many different things. But let's start with, where did you get your entrepreneurial chops? Did it start, were you like 6 years old and you're like, Mom, Dad, we got to do a lemonade stand. We got to do a lemonade stand this weekend on the front lawn? Were you that kind of kid, or were you someone who maybe a little bit later in life you decided that entrepreneurship was for you?
Well, John, thanks first for inviting me to be on your show. I appreciate it, and I'm excited to be here. So I always had the entrepreneurial gene. I always knew I wanted to start a business one day. It was something I thought about when I was a kid. I subscribed to Business Week since I was 13 years old, and I would love reading the stories in there. It was super fun about learning about how entrepreneurs had an idea. They put it down on paper. They had a building block, this block, the second block, the third block. It's something that I always wanted to do. I was creative. I am creative. I like thinking a little differently than some people. And when I was in college, my freshman year at Michigan, I looked around and I saw, gosh, there's a few of us. Well, there's a few people who are starting businesses. They're creating T-shirt companies and note-taking companies. People were selling boxer shorts. And some of these people had built very large businesses in college. My friend Happy Walters made over $1 million in college. He'd been a serial entrepreneur. We remained very good friends. And I always thought, geez, I can do that. And I took $400 of my bar mitzvah money, went through the phone book. There was nothing online then. There was no Google. So you went through the yellow pages, and I looked under T-shirt manufacturers and printers. And I went through and I phoned about 30 of them. I found 2 companies that I thought, okay, this could work and not work. And then I took a risk. I bought 100 shirts, and with the shipping, it cost $500. I went to the dorms. I sold them for $12, one by one, door by door. I think that's where I learned a cold calling skill. You have people who shut the door in your face, and some people like the shirts. So I paid an extra $2 for the long sleeve shirts. I sold those for $18. It was a higher margin for that shirt. And it took the same amount of time to sell the shirt. Wow. So I learned a lot of lessons there. The cold calling skills, the fear of rejection, which I still fear today, frankly. I think that's something that we don't lose. And I think fear is one of the great motivators of our success. And I've started a number of businesses since then. I made money doing that. And even when
the T-shirt itself, do you remember what it said? Did it say something in the front of it?
Yeah, you're the first one to ask that. And back then, nobody was really worried about copyright infringement.
Okay.
And Nike wasn't really making shirts back then either for the colleges. They just started kind of making shirts. So I made Just Do It T-shirts and put different kind of logos on the back. One of them was a road to the Final Four. And thinking back, I made these shirts in 1986, 87. I still have a few of the shirts in my closet. They're mint,
nice,
mint
nice.
editions. And I did make
multiple copyright infringements on there.
Oh, so, there was all kinds of copyright infringements back then.
Final Four, Just Do It.
Yeah, I mean Nike would just come in, and I think they would have people showing up in about 15 seconds. But back then, people did it. I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. And I also made some other non-Nike related T-shirts back then.
That's funny.
And I know I still have a few. They're not for sale. So just for the record, I'm not selling any illegal T-shirts right now. They're considered personal artwork at this point.
Artifacts. I don't know if you read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, but probably around 86, he might not have had enough money to go after you at that point. It's a great story about the origin of Nike. So you have to check that out.
Well, I'm a huge shoe guy, and my son got me into the Jordans. So I have about 20 pair in my closet. So I'm a huge Nike fan. I buy the Dunks, I buy the Jordans, and at some point I'm running out of room for the shoes, but I have a strong affinity for Nike. I did then, and I have even better one now.
You got to read the book because it'll give you appreciation for the company, because it almost didn't survive multiple different times. So talk about Akamai. How did you end up being one of the co-founders of that? Yeah,
we have to back up a little bit to do that, because I think everything we do in life, and we all have a big break. My big break was working at Found America for Eli Broad, and I graduated.
You got a great story how that came about, right?
Well, I do have a good story, and maybe we'll talk about that first if you want to, because
I'd love
it's a
to
natural
hear it.
Progression.
Yeah.
So I went to law school at Northwestern. I did well. I moved out to Los Angeles. I lost my job 5.5 weeks later. There were layoffs. I had never failed at anything before, so I had my ass handed to me 5.5 weeks after moving here. I knew nobody. I had a friend moving out here from college. He wasn't here yet. So here I am. I have $3,000 in the bank. I have a $1,200 a month rent bill, and firms are not hiring. So I was looking at waiting tables, and I found a firm in Costa Mesa, Orange County. I had never heard of Orange County. I know that's naive, but I just moved to Los Angeles. I drove 3 hours each way round trip to work, was working very long hours, coming home at midnight, driving 90 minutes back, and then doing it the next day. And then after 6 months of that, I couldn't take it anymore. So I went to the managing partner of the downtown Los Angeles office of the firm, and I said, I want to move. And he said, no, you got to move down there or leave. So I wasn't moving down to Orange County. I left, was looking for my third job, my first year out of school. And we could just say that wasn't going very well. I would put that into the terrible category. And that wasn't going well. So I had always wanted a business job, but I wanted to go straight through. To get a MBA, they made you work for 2 years, and I didn't want to do that. So I went to law school as a means to an end. And my goal was I'd practice law for 5 to 7 years, go work for a client, hopefully get into the business side of things, and then by the age of 35, start my own business. And of course, things were definitely not going well. So after I got my third job, my first year, after graduating. That had to be some kind of a record. I started planning my way out, and I said, I'm not happy doing this. I never wanted to do this. And there's no time like now. Let's be passionate and follow our dreams and what we want to do. So I determined, okay, what do I want to do? I want to be the right-hand person to a successful CEO. So I had an idea. I'm going to write some letters, and writing to the CEOs of the biggest companies in Los Angeles, Disney, Marriott, studio heads. I went through the Los Angeles Business Journal. I picked off the top 100 publicly traded companies in Los Angeles. I did a bunch of research. Our law firm had a LexisNexis subscription, which you pay for. The firm pays for it. That's a profit center for them, and I charge my time to marketing. One day, the office manager comes into my office. Her name was Sue Mangas. Comes in, she closed the door, and she said, "What are these LexisNexis charges to marketing? You charged $40,000 last month." The firm didn't pay the $40,000. That's what the markup would have been and what they charged. Well, they paid a flat fee.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm interested in bringing in business, and she looks at me and she said, okay, walks out the door. But I did a lot of research to write these letters, and people respond to the research. So I used LexisNexis. I printed out every article that had been written about the CEOs. I came up with a list with 300 people, and I wrote very detailed letters that were very different and unique. And being different and being unique is important as a entrepreneur, because essentially that's what my letter writing campaign was, doing something different, creating a letter that no person had ever seen, CEO or not. And that's exactly what I did. I wrote these letters. I got 80 meetings, and people said, I've never taken a cold meeting like this, and I've never seen a letter like
80
this.
meetings, 300 letters, 80 meetings.
I did. And the funny
do you
thing
remember
is,
what you said in some of these letters?
Oh, sure. I mean, I had a format, but it's sort of a trade secret.
Oh, come on. You're long past that point now. Pay it forward.
Well, I am paying it forward, and I don't share the letters, but this is basically what it
give
is.
us an idea.
Let me back up for 1 second.
Okay.
I'm going to give you an idea, but I do want to back up.
Okay.
I told people what I was doing and what I wanted to do, and every single person said, you're out of your mind. Nobody is going to meet with you. Michael Eisner at Disney, which has 100,000 employees or whatever the numbers, you think he's going to take a cold letter from you and sit down with a meeting? Sumner Redstone, the founder of Viacom, is going to sit down with you. And I said, you know what? You don't ask, you don't get. And I don't like being told no on something where I have a gut instinct. And the more I heard no, I trusted my gut, my instincts, and I said, I'm going to earn the meeting. And that's what I did. And this was the letter, John. The letter was a compilation of all my research. So the second bedroom of my apartment was a letter writing factory. So I had my note cards on top of a stack of information, 5 inches thick, that of all the things that I had printed out, I highlighted all of that. I incorporated my research into the letter, and it listed all the jobs they had ever had. The details were things like Stephen Bolenbach's first job was scooping ice cream at Disneyland when he was 16 years old. And one newspaper clipping profile from 25 years back had mentioned that. And he said to me, how on earth did you know that? I went back 25 years and found a newspaper article that said that. And I compiled all that research. So I knew every job that I knew where they went to school, job 1, job 2, job 3. I incorporated that into my letter. And then I had a cover letter on top of which was, the letter was bound in one of those plastic binders that, you spin it in. And it had a plastic cellophane cover, a quote that they had said a long time ago. It was tabbed with my transcripts and letters of recommendation and some interesting things that I had done as well. So that was the letter.
And 80 meetings, 80 in-person meetings or phone calls?
So there were 65 or 66 meetings in person, and the rest were phone meetings. So there was no Zoom then. So I'm calling a phone call meeting.
Yeah.
I did crazy things like.
What were some of those meetings like? Any of them stand out in your mind?
Oh yeah, I mean I've got a lot of stories about those meetings.
You mentioned Michael Eisner. You mentioned
Yeah. Strauss Zelnick, who has become a good friend, and I have many, many good friends that have come from these cold calls. I mean, 20-something years later, Strauss has become a good friend. He's someone that I looked up to before I met him. He was COO of Fox at age 30, CEO when he was 32, CEO of BMG when he was 40, and has gone on to do some incredible things. He bought Take-Two Interactive when I think for $14 million. It has a $18 billion market cap today. He's chairman of CBS. I looked up to him. I wrote him a letter. First, I went to a conference. An investment banker named Mike Yeagerman, who was an MD at Bear Stearns back in the time, I wrote him a cold letter. And I said at the end of my meetings, I said, who else should I meet? Who else can you make an introduction to? And he said, you should come to our media and entertainment conference in Laguna. So I took off a day of work. And again, it's very nice of him. And he said to me before, they said, if you want to hunt moose, go where the moose are. And there were a lot of moose at this meeting. So Strauss is there. That's where I sat down with Sumner Redstone and some others. And I meet him there. And when someone is a speaker there, you know, the crowd. You get the circle when they're done speaking. They're walking out. They're 3 people deep.
Yeah.
Strauss was walking out, and I waited my turn, and you could tell I was waiting for the crowd to thin out. And I finally said, "Hey, I'm Randy. I wrote you the letter." He said, "Oh yeah." I said, "I'm catching a plane back to New York. Call me, and I'll be back, and we'll set up a meeting." Each meeting that I had, I made sure I got there 1 hour before. You're not going to show up in a lobby 1 hour before. But I want to make sure I live in LA, traffic, you plan for things, never be late for a meeting, ever, 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 ever. So I would go up 15 minutes before, and I think that's a good sign. I think it's a good look. You show up before you're supposed to start. People recognize that. The office manager, who I still remember her name, Liz Ramirez, comes out, says, Strauss will be out in 15 minutes. I thought that was interesting. She called him Strauss, not Mr. Zelnick. And that was, I took note of that. Strauss is running 4 minutes late. He comes out himself. He's on the phone with one of those things, and he says, I'm really sorry. I'm going to be right there. And I thought, I'm looking around. I mean, I had a lot of meetings. People keep you waiting. They don't care. And I'm the least important thing on the agenda that day. And Strauss, by the way, was on the phone with Clive Davis, who's probably the most important people in the one of the most important people in the history of the music business. And we became good friends. That was a lesson that I learned. I learned a couple things. First name basis. I hate when people call me Mr. I'm not a Mr. I've never been a Mr. I'm Randy, and people know to call me Randy. And you always want to treat people well. You never want to make somebody wait. Things do happen. I have an important phone call. But I do the same thing. If I'm running late and I'm on the phone and someone's waiting for me, I'm going to go out there and say, I'm really sorry. I'll be right there. So that was a great one. And another, there were some great ones and there were some other ones. One, you learn on the positive side how you want to be treated when someone treats you well. I always say, okay, something good happens to me. I'm going to borrow from that because I learned something and I like how that made me feel. I was at another meeting with the head of a major studio, one of the biggest producers of all time, and he had me come to his house. So there I am. I pull up to this huge gate, Beverly Hills, mansion up on the hill, and there was in front of me a woman, a very pretty woman, and wearing a bikini top and a Mercedes convertible who pulls in first. She rings the gate. She goes in. I kind of wait. I wait, and I go in too up the driveway. She goes left toward the pool. And I'm thinking, okay, this is Hollywood. I don't know what to expect. I get in the house. The butler shows me into the kitchen, and I'm waiting outside of his office. I could see he's on the phone. I'm sitting around. He has pictures in this part of the kitchen with every president of the United States for the past 40 years.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, okay, whatever. I go into his office finally. He's running about a half minute late. We shake. He sits behind this big wood desk. I'm in front of had these chairs, and he props up his shoes on the desk, sort of in front of my face. I still remember the Ferragamo, the cursive on the bottle of the Ferragamo shoes. And I said, okay, well, that's something that I'm never going to do. And the footnote to the story is I have to think about how to protect the identity of him. But my kids went to a very good private school in West Los Angeles where we live. And one day, we get called to the headmaster's house. And it was not an invite. It was, you're coming here. And I get there, and it's my wife and 3 other couples, including the chairman of the board of the school. I'm looking around. They were raising money for their school. They were building a big building. I'm new to the school. I've been there a month. I'm sitting there thinking, okay, whatever. And this guy's there. And I'm thinking, okay, interesting. Nice to meet you. And I said, oh, we met a long time ago back in 1995. He said, oh, where, I didn't give him the details. But we ended up becoming friends with him. My wife and I have been to dinner with he and his friends, and
Is it more
his wife and he.
You're in a different stature at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I told him generically about the meeting. I left out the shoe part of the meeting. I mean, he wanted to know what I was doing back then and what we were talking about. I said I was a very unsuccessful lawyer. My career was going terrible, and I contacted you. And he said, well, what are you up to now? And he said, wow, that's really great. It's a good thing you didn't take that job. So, I mean, there was no job there to be had anyway.
Did anything happen with the woman in the bikini top walking around to the pool, or is that just...
That's a great question. I was going to mention that they got married and have several kids.
Really? Oh, interesting.
Yeah. When we went to dinner with them, I told him the story of the approach. And I said that was really cool about the presidents, but I left out the office, the shoe, the running late. And his wife said, that was me.
Ah, funny. That's funny.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the footnote there.
Yeah. Any other crazy stories from that time before we move on to something else?
None really come to mind or that would be appropriate to mention on the show. Okay. So I think we'll leave it at
afterwards
that.
Over a drink or something. The funny thing is I did something similar in Los Angeles also. When I graduated from college, I sent out, I think, about 100 letters, so not 300. And I did not do as much research as you did. And I was working to break into the entertainment industry. This is before I went back and worked at the White House, but when I was working to break into the entertainment industry and sent it out to different producers and stuff like that, and didn't have as much success as you did. So I probably should have copied your style.
Right. Let me share one more with you.
Okay.
When I graduated University of Michigan in 1990, Larry Kasdan was the graduation speaker. Larry was a Michigan graduate, obviously. He produced and directed The Big Chill, which is about 7 Michigan grads. That actually was Kevin Costner's first role. He played the dead person in the coffin. But Larry, non-speaking role, obviously, Larry gave an amazing speech. And I said, that'd be a great guy to meet someday. I was looking at possibly going into the entertainment business. I said, he'd be a really good guy to know. So I sent him a letter, sent it to the office, and I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to not send it to his home. I think I'm going to just drop it off at the front porch on his home, which I did. And so through LexisNexis, you can find out where people live. And I went by and I dropped off the letter on his porch. It was my packet. It was the spiral bound thing, whatever. Never heard from him. After our company went public, he had an event at his house for certain Michigan grads living in Los Angeles. So we're sitting there in his den, and 2 of us are talking. I said, you were my graduation speaker. It was so motivational. I love, you love the movie, love what you've done. And he said, okay, what do you do? And I said, I think I'm just going to let it loose here. I think I'm going to let it rip, and I'm going to tell him what I did. And I told him the story. And he said, I remember that letter. He said, I didn't know what to make of it. He said, it's a little creepy. Someone left a letter in my house. But he said, and he's looking at me, and he said, what do you do again? And, he knew I was at that point on the board of Michigan, and the fact I was there was I had some credit at that point.
Right.
Wasn't a crazy guy at that point.
That's funny. Well, anyone listening to this, highly encourage you to follow Randy's strategy, not mine. Put the effort, put the extra energy into it. It pays off. So you connected with Eli Broad through this process as well?
Yeah. So,
and explain who Eli Broad is. Unfortunately, he just sadly passed away.
Yeah, sadly.
But explain who he is for those who don't know.
At that point in 1996, when he hired me, he was one of only 3 people to start 2 Fortune 500 companies. The first was Coffin and Broad Home Corporation, which he started in the 1960s. It was a Fortune 500 company, now renamed KB Home. And then he started a company, Sun America, which is a insurance company that was bought by AIG for $18 billion in 1998. So I wrote him a letter. I did my research. I knew things about these CEOs and the companies that most people wouldn't know. I knew he had a position called the assistant to the chairman. I knew the 5 people who had it. This was not a job that he put in the newspaper for it. And at the time, the 37-year-old COO and vice chairman, Jay Wintraub, had been the assistant to the chairman, I think a little less than 10 years before. He was a former lawyer as well. And 4 of the 5 people before me, they were also lawyers. So I wrote him a letter, and it was a public company. So again, research pays. And I read the 10K, the annual report. I outlined both. And I went in there and I prepared for the interviews like these were final exams. You see a lot of people phone it in. They come into my office now. They haven't looked at the website, or they glance at it. They spend 20 minutes, which is ridiculous because you spend more time at work than you do at home with your family. And if you want to succeed and get a great job, you got to do your research, because people will come in. The first thing is, what's the name of my dog? And some people will spit it out right away. And some people will say, I don't know. And the interview's over if they don't know, because it's on my website. So for that meeting, I knew about the job. I knew it could change my life. And there were a few like this as well. And so I knew this was the most important meeting of my life from a business perspective at that point. And I studied for it. I outlined the annual report, the 10K, and I really didn't know a lot about finance back then. I know a little bit more today. And I read through the financial statements. I would try to figure out what they meant, but I was going to go in there and memorize 20 questions. And these aren't softball questions. Why did you get into business? What were you like when you were a kid? Those are not impressive questions. I noticed that you took a $346 million write-off last year after purchasing this division of John Hancock. And I was wondering what, if you bought the company, what the hit to the earnings would be. And do you worry about that when you think about growth for a public company, how it would impact the performance of the stock? What?
Not a small question. Yeah.
People are not asking these questions, right? And I had to learn even what I looked at the footnote of the financial statements to ask questions. And again, I memorized these. I was ticking these off. And we had a 90-minute meeting. I worked there for 3 years. I never had a 90-minute one-on-one meeting with him in 3 years. Wow. But you could see him jotting things down as I went, like scribbling. And the scribble is a good sign, right? If he's sitting back there and he's
sure.
But I knew I was racking off some points. And then he starts to tell me about this job. I have this job. It's called the assistant to chairman. I said, yeah, I know. I said, here are the 5 people who have had that job. This is the year they had it. This is the year they had it. He's his head keeps going like this, and he's scribbling.
Like pre-LinkedIn. Like, this isn't easy to find this kind of information.
You can't find it. I mean,
it's easy.
I found
these
it. It's super easy these days, but it wasn't back then. So we leave the meeting, and he says, well, he said to me, what do you know about finance? I said nothing. And he points to the stack of papers. It was like a foot tall. He said, could you go through that and tell me what that company's worth that we're thinking of buying? I said, no. And he said, because if you told me you could and you couldn't, you wouldn't last here one day. And I said, I couldn't tell you. So he said, I want you to take a class at a business class at UCLA and get a catalog, and I'll pick one out for you. I said, okay, no promises. So I left his office. It was
So he hasn't offered you a
day.
job. He just says, go and
Nothing.
take a business class. Got it. Okay.
We had, get a catalog and he'll pick one. No promises whatsoever. So I leave the office, and it was so hot that day. It was a 90-degree day. I leave the office. My law firm was right across the street. So I ran out. I got in my car in the parking garage. I drove to UCLA. I didn't know, I'd never been on campus before. I parked in a no parking zone. Thankfully, I didn't get towed, but I did get a ticket. And I ran around campus. Where do I get a class catalog? I found one. I ran back to my car. I went home to my apartment. I typed a thank you letter, and I returned it to his office within an hour. And this is a lesson that I want people to know, and I teach people this. You have a meeting. You don't wait till the end of the day to send a thank you meeting. You don't wait till the next day. Impressions matter. First impressions matter. I done a lot. I did a lot in 60 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew what I must have done in that amount of time. How did I get this back in an hour? I'm sure the receptionist said, Mr. Bro, there's a package for you here. Mm-hmm. And they bring it right to Sharon, his assistant, and Sharon's going to show it to him. This is the guy who you just met with.
Yeah.
And that was huge. So his assistant calls back a week later. Mr. Broad is not in town, but he wanted me to tell you to take one of these two classes. Recommend, not tell you. And I said, okay, tell him I'm going to take both. And long story short, I was hired. I got a job offer on my 27th birthday. So
Nice.
I was assistant to chairman. I had a managing director title as well of Corp Dev, which is the M&A function within the firm. So we're looking to buy different companies. You asked about the Akamai introduction. My girlfriend's brother at the time, who became my brother-in-law, knew one of the co-founders who was getting his PhD at MIT. And they had invented some technology that was going to improve the way that information, video, pictures were sent over the web. And it was very unique. And they wanted my managing director title for the business person on the business plan for the MIT 50K competition, which we lost. And that was the origin of how I became one of 4 founders at Akamai.
Got it. But let me before we get into more about Akamai, what else? We focused primarily on what you did to get that job, which was amazing with Eli Broad. But what did you learn from working for him for 3 years? What did you learn? What did he teach you?
Well, to get a job like that is not simple. And to work with him was not simple. He worked a lot. I was so proud of myself when I got that job. I mean, personally proud. I didn't walk around, my parents were proud. And my dad came to visit shortly after, and we were going to dinner. And he said, can I see the office? I said, absolutely. Super pumped about it. We go by the office at 7:30 on a Saturday night. The office is spectacular, by the way. He's huge modern art. For those of you who haven't been to the Broad Museum in Los Angeles, it's spectacular.
He must have had it hanging all over the place.
The office in Los Angeles was mostly up and coming California artists, but there were some different kind of pieces that were quite spectacular there. Yeah. And
by the way, given how hard it was to get a job working for him, it's appropriate that it was impossible to get into his museum for years. Still is, I think so.
It's become more impossible. I mean, thankfully, I know his the curator of his collection and
might need a hookup.
The museum.
I might need a hookup at some point.
She's been very nice to me. Last minute, when I need to go there with friends or my family.
Oh, awesome! That's cool.
But so we walk in. I mean, his doors open. And I'm thinking the cleaning crew is going to be in there. So we walk in and look up, and there he is in a suit in the middle of stacks of paper.
Wow.
Working. And he said, Eli, this is my dad. And he was very, very nice. You should be very proud of your son. And my dad is super proud. And we walked out of there, and my dad's shaking his head, and I'm shaking mine. Yeah. You get it. People would say, why is he still working that hard? He's numbered this on the Forbes 400. And my response would be, if you ask the question, you don't understand the answer.
Well, that's how he got there.
That's how he got there.
Yeah.
And most of the workaholics I know, most of the super successful people I know, and I've been grateful to meet some of those people, they work like that too.
Yeah.
We had nothing going on that weekend. I mean, I was privy to extremely confidential information. We were not buying a company. I mean, he was just working.
Yeah, interesting. I want to ask you. So you're a busy guy, and when you're not, wakeboarding, you're not playing the drums.
Wake surfing.
Sorry. Yeah. When you're not flying drones, doing photography, or walking your mischievous dog Karma on the weekends. I wanted to ask you. You're big into mentorship. You have a lot of young people who come in and work for you. That's important to you. You got 5 kids.
Yeah.
What do you take away from that experience? You've already shared a bunch of lessons, but are there any other lessons from that experience of getting your first job in Los Angeles, working hard, working for, uber successful entrepreneur? And how do you bring that to parenting or to mentoring?
Well, there's a lot to unpack in what you just said, and I don't even know where to start, but I've learned a lot of lessons as a professional, both an unsuccessful professional and a successful professional. I'm a big believer in that we learn more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. I believe it's very important to look around and see how you're treated and think about whether you want to treat people the same way. And when people are mistreated, it doesn't make you feel good. And when someone treats you well, it makes you feel good. We have a team at my companies. It's very small. They work with me. They work a lot of hours. They get a lot out of it. But they don't work for me. They work with me. And I never liked being an employee of companies where so-and-so would say, Randy works for me. I found that very egotistical. It didn't make me feel good. And I took things like that saying, I'm not going to be that way. And I think it's the right thing to do to just be very polite and to be very humble. I've had an opportunity to meet a lot of very successful people who have a very large amount of money, both those who, where it's family money, and those people who have made it themselves. I know a lot of people who are extremely humble. You would never know they have money. And I know a lot of people who brag about money and how much they have because somehow they feel that they need to. I admire the humble people, and I teach my kids to be very humble. They grow up in a way that I did not grow up. We go on very nice vacations. We're going on next week, my first real vacation since June of 2019. A beach vacation. I'll have 2 drones with me. I never traveled without them. But every trip that we've ever taken with my kids from the minute they were young, even today, on the drive to the airport, what I tell them is, we're incredibly lucky. The cost of this trip is more than 90% of the people in the world will make in their lifetime. And I didn't grow up this way. And I want us to all appreciate the flight, the hotel, the cost, the meals. And I know they're going to take that with them. They know, Dad, here comes the speech. I said, the speech is never going to go away. The other things that I take from these trips is I'm taking my girls, twin girls. They're just finished their freshman year at college. It's important for me to spend one-on-one time with my kids. It's a tradition I've done since the kids were 4 years old. We go on one-on-one trips. It allows me to spend one-on-one time with them. It was something I want to do when I have 3 kids. It's something that I want to do now when I have 5 kids. And it's my time to really not focus on work and to bond with my kids. And the older they get, the less time they want to spend with me. You know, they're into their friends, and I think that's cool. But I cherish these moments. And you look around and you see a lot of successful people who are workaholics, and they really don't spend a lot of time with their kids. And it's important for me to connect with my kids, and my kids know that even though they may not want to spend as much time with me as I do with them, they know that I really want to spend that time with them. I mean, you learn so many things from watching different people. I've got a friend named Rick Rivera, who's my parent guru, and I met him. I went on a date with my ex-wife. This was our second date. I was 26 years old, I think, and she said, "Oh, my friend's going to Universal with her 4 kids." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, do you want to go with them?" And I really did not want to go with them. I couldn't even imagine the thought of having kids at that time. Rick and Dana had a license plate for under 5. These were all young kids, and we went to Universal. I was a good sport. I had no interest in going there. And I went there, and they were a great family, and Rick and I became great friends. His kids are now older. I'm a mentor and good friend to them. One of them got married at my house 3 months ago. And you don't know what you're doing as a parent the first time there. You talk to your friends. And he's my guru. So you lean on people that you meet. You lean on your friends when you don't know. And eventually you go through life. He's an amazing father to his kids. And I've learned a lot from him, and I have a lot of other friends that I've learned things from as well. And I try to incorporate all the good things and none of the bad things. Of course, no one's perfect. I've done a lot of bad things, made mistakes as a parent that you learn from.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Lots of good lessons there.
We went way longer than I expected, so I apologize for that.
Let's keep going. I got as much time as you want.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I love this.
A couple more questions. I want to circle back to Akamai, and also in the context of some of the other investments that you made, because amazing track record. Or you invested in Google, and you invested in Lyft, all these different companies. What did you see when you first connected with the other co-founders for Akamai? How did you see the potential? Did you see this is going to be a multi-billion-dollar company, employ thousands of people one day?
So one of the expressions that I tell young entrepreneurs who come into my office, I probably met with several thousand, and you fund some of them, and then you're a mentor to some people. And there's an old saying, you don't know what good is. They think that they've got this VP, he did this, she did that, and they don't know. What's good to them may not look good to you. You've been doing it for longer. I had worked with an incredible team at Sun America. You got to be top to work with Eli. And I knew what greatness was. I'd prepare these very complex financial models. We were looking to buy companies. You have to merge the companies together. Very complex, 100-page models. You'd go in there, and you present it. Eli would look at it. He'd find the mistake on page 34, and he was right. He had an innate sense, and the people there were very bright. So I had a good baseline for brilliant people. The Akamai founders, 2 of them were brilliant, and I was around them, and one of the questions that I said to them as we started talking, I got to know them better. How many people on earth today would understand the math behind the formulas, the algorithms that powered our technology. And one of the founders said, not many. And I said, under 10? He said, probably under 10. And you look for certain criteria like that. So you want to work with very bright people. I knew, had I studied and gone to school 10 years, I don't think I could have really comprehended the math that went into a lot of this. After working there, I knew how it worked. I could explain it in plain English. But I like the team and I like the opportunity. And when I left Sun America, I had in the money stock options. The company was the most successful performing stock on the New York Stock Exchange for the 1, 3, 5, and 7 year periods that preceded me. The stock had risen 6,000% in 5 years. And I had options that were worth at the time $1.5 million, which is what I gave up when I left there. Eli sold the company 3 months after I left for $18 billion, full vesting for everybody there. So I had 3 years left on my grant. And if I had stayed 3 months, I would have collected $2 million. And you look at the opportunity cost and you think about, okay, if I wait 3 years, these vests, you assume this appreciation potential. And I said, geez, here's what I'm going to own of this company. And I said, gosh, I hope we create a $200 million value company, because after factoring the risk and the loss, that's kind of where I thought my math would be. And it ended up being much, much more than that.
Better than that.
It was a little bit better than that, yeah.
So your estimates were, I hope that it's going to be much under what it actually ended up being.
Yeah, I mean, something happened to the Akamai, to us that will never happen again, I think, in history. We started a company in August of 1998. We went public on October 27th, 1999, my mom's birthday, the anniversary date of my first firing when I went out from law school. I was crying that day, and I was a little bit happier when we went public.
Wow.
And the stock, we had raised the offering price, almost doubled it from where we had filed it based on the demand of the stock. And the stock went public at $28 a share. The first trade was, we closed that day at $144. It was a 458% return on that first day. So I don't think anyone expected that. Wow. The shortness by which the duration from when we started the company to when we went public will probably never happen again. And we only had $3.2 million in revenue, GAAP revenue through that period of time. Most of it from one company, Apple.
Wow. That's amazing.
So I left.
Yeah, these days, would you say it's
early.
a much higher bar for companies before they
Sure.
go?
Oh, yeah. That would never happen. Yeah. I mean, the average length, the average age of a company that goes public today is somewhere between 12 and 14 years.
So you left. Why did you leave?
Early, I left.
Why?
I was commuting back and forth to Los Angeles. I mean, what I did, again, people thought I was out of my mind. So I had this great job at Sun America. Things probably going to go well for me there. I knew lots of people in LA from my letter writing campaign. And I went from this hungry kid that no one knew what to do with, to, okay, this guy worked for someone successful and now has a background. And I had some opportunities to do some other things. I went to Eli after the first year. I said, I need more to do. He said, you're my first round draft pick. You'll get more playing time this year. I got a little bit more playing time that year, but at that point, I was reading about what people were doing in Silicon Valley. I thought technology was something I wanted to do. I didn't want to go back, to business school. So I had the option. I was going to look behind his back for a job, or I was going to tell him. And I thought honesty was the best policy. He gave me my big break. I was super grateful to him. Of course, I was worried he was going to say, "You're ungrateful. You're out of here." But I told him, and I told him what I wanted to do, and I told him why. And he said, "I think you're making a mistake, but you can stay as long as you want here." And I stayed that third year with the freedom to do and go find different opportunities. And I had 10, but I picked this one for a number of reasons. But I was commuting to Boston with no funding, no salary, no CEO. And again, everybody told me I lost my mind. But I trusted my gut and I did it. And ultimately, the one condition that I had to joining the company, which I said no to more than a few times, was that I didn't want to move. I was willing to make the commute every week, but I just didn't want to move. And I had helped raise a lot of the money in that first round, and I'd also put my own money into that round as well. And the commute was tough. I would head out Sunday on the 4:00 flight. I'd get in at 12:30. I would get to my hotel, and at first it was a motel with the Coors Light sign blaring on the window. And I took
so glamorous.
I was not on the nonstop, back then for some of the flights. But we finally hired a CEO, and he said, "I want you to move." And I said, I don't want to move, and that's part of my deal. And he said, if you don't want to move, you can be the head of West Coast sales. And I didn't want to do that either. I had some other things that I could have done, CEO type roles that I had turned down, and I had helped hire the VP of sales. So that wasn't something I wanted to do. So I had the option to leave. Or I had the option to stay and take a job that I didn't want, that I didn't think would be good for my career. And it was a very tough thing to do. We had raised money. We had 10 beta customers. My name was on the contract for 7 of them. I was our VP of Biz Dev, and I think we had maybe 30 to 50 people back then. And it was very tough. I didn't know what to do. I told the CEO I would get back to him. I called Jay Wintraub at Sun America. But at that point, I think he'd been promoted to the CEO, and I view Jay as one of my mentors. And I said, "Jay, here's the deal." I told him I'm conflicted, and he made it simple. He said, "What's this thing worth?" I told him what our private company valuation was, and he said, "What % of this thing do you own?" And then I told him, and it was, he said to me, "Why are we having this conversation?" And the bell went off.
In other words, you knew the answer already.
He made it clear what the answer would be. He had done all the calculus, and the calculus was extremely simple, and it became simple for me.
Yeah.
So I left, and I started my own venture capital firm. Now we do a bunch of different things. Yeah. But that's how it started.
Let me ask about that. So you invested in Google, you invested in Lyft, Postini, all these different companies. What you mentioned, important factor for you is preparation, intelligence, a smart team. What else goes into your evaluation of companies these days when you're considering about investing?
The first and most important factor for me is the quality and my evaluation of the founder or founders. And I always had that burning desire to succeed. I always had that killer instinct where I wanted to be successful, and I was going to do whatever it took on the work ethic front and on the intangible front to try to reach my dreams. And the interviews that I have are focused around that and trying to bring out those qualities to see if I can evaluate those. Obviously, we look at the business, the moat, what the competition is. We look at all kinds of things, but it always comes back for me to the people. That's the most important factor for me.
Yeah. And of all the different founders that have come through that you've evaluated, maybe pick 1 or 2 that have just knocked your socks off, and why?
Yeah. One of my oldest and a very close friend is named Brad Keywell. He's founded 4 public companies. Groupon was his 4th. Uptake will be his 5th. He's going to be a guest on my podcast. I'm super excited to have him. We've been friends since college. Brad is the best entrepreneur that I know. hands down. He thinks differently. He's brilliant. He's creative. He's easily the best. Brian Lee is just right there with Brad. He's a superstar. Co-founder of LegalZoom, was the CEO. Co-founder of The Honest Company, which went public this week. Runs BAM Ventures, a venture capital firm. I'm very close with Brian. He's one of my buddies who we can talk about very sensitive things that would be hard to have a conversation with people without the experiences that we had. And he is a great entrepreneur. He's someone I admire a lot. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He's as humble can be. And he's a great thinker too. We co-invest a lot together. And I've learned a lot from him. And the funny thing is too, philanthropy is hugely important to me. And I started an event called the Justice Ball, and when I was 27 years old. I think we're in year 25 right now. I ran it for the first 10 years. It's done very well.
You've had some amazing musical acts at that.
Yeah, we have. The Go-Go's, Billy Idol, B-52s. But I was considering and thinking about was going to start a second charity event. I was looking for something in foster care of the homeless. My grandmother was raised in foster care. It's the cause I'm most dedicated to. And I was cold calling CEOs of nonprofits. They all knew of the Justice Ball. They had heard of me, and they all ran to my office, except for one. And this guy wouldn't show up. One day his cat was sick, and I have a lot of people who would like me to donate to their nonprofits, and they're all great causes. You have to pick and choose which ones that you want to do. And I donate very quietly, often anonymously. I think that's the highest form of giving. But this guy would not show up to my office. So I looked on the board. I said, Brian, I know a Brian. And I cold called him. I'm like, hey, Brian, my name's Randall Kaplan. I'm trying to meet with the executive director of your nonprofit. I'm interested in getting involved in giving money. And that's how I became friends with Brian.
Interesting. So yeah, that's great. Well, we're way over on time. So I want to wrap it up. Okay. And you've mentioned a bunch of great names here. But I want to ask my gratitude question, which is I'm a big fan of gratitude, which I can sense you are as well. And when you look around at your peers and contemporaries, however you want to define that, you know a lot of founder, entrepreneur, investor types. Yeah. Who do you respect? Who do you admire?
I mean, I've named a few of my contemporaries. I've named two, Brad, Brian. You have to give the credit where the credit is due. I mean, it begins with my grandmother. She was raised in foster care. She's a breast cancer survivor. She volunteered for Children's Hospital for 40 years. She had a very tough life. She's the matriarch of my family. She's my role model. She's my hero. So I give her a lot of the credit. And then I had some, what's interesting is at some point you go from being the mentee to a peer. And there was someone named David Page, who I grew up. He was the CEO of the best law firm in Detroit, Honigman. It was the hardest job to get. I spent my second summer there. He wrote me my letter of recommendation for law school. He believed in me. I knew him when I was a young kid. He coached my brothers in my Little League team, and he was Mr. Page. And Mr. Page was incredible. He was an icon in the Detroit community, the legal community. And when Akamai went public, he said at one point, you can call me David. And he was David. And during that summer, there were 10 of us in the summer program, and he put the fix in. We all had a mentor, and his fix was, my mentor was David Fulton. And David was the head of the corporate group. He was David Page's protege. And David was my mentor. So he's 12 years older than I am. He's married for the second time like I am. He has twins who have become really good friends with my kids, and he was the best man at my wedding.
Very cool.
So yeah, it's funny how things work out. I have a number of mentees who are now my peers as well, and it's great to see.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And that brings us full circle, brings it around to your new podcast, which I'm totally excited for you, because you're going to get to reconnect with all those different mentees who became peers, mentors who you became a peer of. So In Search of Excellence, the name of it. You've got Sharon Stone already. Amazing. Talk about some of the different guests that you have. Sam Zell, some really amazing guests already.
Yeah, we have Sharon, who's awesome. Sam Zell, who's awesome. Strauss Zelnick, I've mentioned. Anthony Scaramucci. I had an incredible session yesterday with Tim Draper, one of the most successful venture capitalists of all time. Cliff Kingsbury, the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals football team. We met on a boat. We almost drowned together. We were in snorkeling in Baker's Bay. That was a phenomenal bonding moment 7 years ago. You can check out the podcast to hear that funny story, and you could learn more about Tom Brady and what he said to me on that trip as well. One of the highlights of my athletic career, which wasn't very much. Yeah. But the podcast is about our desire.
It's really too bad you didn't, if you drowned on a boat with Tim Brady at the same time.
Cliff, Tom was not on the boat.
He was, okay.
Cliff was on the boat.
I was saying, because that probably would have been the headline. It would have been a shame, like, there were some other people on the boat too.
Yeah. No one would have cared about me. The story would have been, about Tom. But so the podcast is about our quest and desire to maximize our potential and be the best we can be, to live our dreams, to believe in ourselves, and overcome the challenges, trials, and tribulations that we all have. No matter how successful Sam went through his, Tim Draper went through his. Sharon Stone has an amazing book that just came out, The Beauty of Living Twice. It's, I think, number 4 on the bestseller list. But there's a common thread to people who have been successful, and you have to plan for it. You have to keep coming back. There are going to be all kinds of challenges, and you really have to have a plan. And so my goal is that my podcast inspires and motivates people to achieve their dreams and maximize their potential on their way to excellence.
That's awesome. And then Sandee, of course, is also another portfolio company that you are focused on. Tell us what that is.
Yeah, Sandee is my full-time job. That's the 70-hour-a-week job. And we have created the world's largest beach database. It's a Yelp for beaches. We've cataloged 94 categories of data for every beach in the world, more than 50,000 beaches in 212 countries. And we have a Yelp for beaches. That's the business. That's the consumer side. And then we have a proprietary database that we're licensing to government tourist boards throughout the world to help them increase tourism revenues. So super excited about that business. We have about 100,000 hours into that business over 7 years. I've self-funded it. We're just raising our first round of outside capital, but our future there is very bright. I'm super excited about that one.
All right. If you are an investor and you are in the beach space or want to be, contact Randy. All right. Jumpinvestors.com. Sand.ee is the website for Sandee, correct?
Well,
or is there a different one?
John, persistence pays. So I first reached out to the woman who owned Sandee.com 7 years ago. Her name is Sandee Swanson. She lives in Aurora, Colorado. I've attempted to buy it, I think, more than 70 times. And was successful 3.5 weeks ago. Wow. So we now own the domain name. Persistence pays, and that's one of my lessons. So
nice.
We bought it 3 weeks ago, so it's now Sandee.com. Sandee.com. Thank you, Sandee, and Tom as well. Tom, her husband.
Very cool. All right, Randy, it's such a pleasure. Jumpinvestors.com is the other website, and anywhere else people should go to connect with you or learn more about you.
Sure. I want to mention one other thing. I want to give a big shout out to my book, Bliss. It's a coffee table book of a selection of my beach drone photographs from around the world. You can get it on sale, pre-order right now on Amazon.com. I promise it'll make you happy and smile when you look at some of these photos, and it'll inspire you to travel to new places.
All right, Randy, thank you so much.
John, thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
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 And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.